your version of Christianity is wrong. Or, okay, in the least, it must be restructured, rearranged, reinterpreted. We have to consistently renew our worldviews and our perspectives about what Christ meant, about what Christianity is and does in the world, about the way that we understand and see the Bible. And I was just thinking about this, and my name is Adam. I grew up in the Methodist tradition. That probably explains it all. But I went to school to study theology, discovered philosophy, got a master's degree in religion and philosophy, sort of an alternative to seminary. It was sort of like a more educationally focused path than a more ministerial path. Then started studying psychology and how worldviews develop and mature and grow and even collapse, and applying that to my own legacy within the Abrahamic tradition. So I have 3 master's degrees. I've been teaching for years, and so and I've also been on this path of sobriety for 14 years, sort of rediscovering what God's work in the human psyche and upon the human life really looks like. And I've sort of discovered so much inspiration, profound works, like miracles, genuinely, in the realm of the 12-step world. And so that's been part of my narrative that informs this video. And so I was thinking about, gosh, so many churches, and I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and so many churches in the Bible Belt and in the world at large, but specifically like this third Christian millennium, where churches are on the whole shrinking, and sort of like their product is not being bought wide sell by the public anymore. And just thinking about like what the transformative and power that was at the root of these traditions, the Christian tradition, Christ's life and message and ministry, and how that can be relevant today. It's like through the 12-step realm, it's like I've discovered like, oh, the 12 steps are just sort of like a distilled version of the spiritual principles in the Gospels. No wonder it's like effective for healing people's lives. The spiritual principles and the Gospels of Jesus Christ have sort of migrated, been opened up to be radically inclusive and sort of relanguaged in a way that directly addresses like the alcoholic or the gambling addict or the overeater, or pick your 12-step group, right? Of course, it's relevant. The spiritual traditions, the spiritual principles at work just work, right? And there's this story, I just thinking about how profoundly entrenched our heuristics are clinging to interpretations of the Bible, of the life and work and ministry of Jesus Christ, and our Christian tradition, like what it means to be a Christian. You often hear like, if you haven't walked down the aisle, if you haven't confessed with your lips and your heart that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, then you actually don't get to go to heaven. And we are about the business. For those of us that have been initiated into this salvific process, into this salvific relationship with the living Christ, that we are charged to minister, to evangelize, to save souls so that others don't perish in hell, right? Because that's, in many churches, they're sort of leaving behind that language, like perish in hell. And they're working on their language to sort of like package that frame in a way. Sorry, my voice is crying. I was at a theme park the other day, like yelling my head off. So, forgive my voice. So, churches are at the business of sort of trying to relanguage and package that idea, that path of salvation, into a way that's sort of like, well, we gotta, let's not tell them they're going to hell. Because, the generation that I grew up in, still, I hear this with my students. It's like, they want nothing to do with that type of condemnation and damnation, and but you can't get an exclusivistic perspective of salvation and not have those on the outside have some sort of consequence or punishment or whatever, hell, the eternal hell. That and so those things are being rearranged, but this story came to me, and it just highlights some of the sort of institutional, sort of like collective dysfunction. It's almost like a psychological dysfunction on a large institutional scale that happens within churches and within the culture at large when we fixate on a specific interpretive lens to qualify others for what, the in and the out. Are you Christian or are you not? Because you still get that question throughout. Like, you meet someone and the first thing they's like, are you a Christian? And it's sort of like, I don't, yeah, I don't know. Wait, what do you mean by that? Like, that's always like, well, I can tell you a story about my life and about my walk with God, but I'm not sure that that's what you're asking me. And so it's such a problematic question and a problematic frame, right? Because the assumption on that frame is like, either you're in or you're out, and if you're out, then I gotta save you. And if you're in, then like, but it's like, you don't know that person. And it's such a poor question. And so that question has assumptions and layers of interpretation of the biblical text, Jesus' life and ministry, and what Christianity means as a whole that come with it, that sort of motivate and sort of frame that question. There's this story that highlights how toxic and dysfunctional that can be with the Catholic Church. And it was around the early 16th century. There was this guy named Copernicus, Nicholas Copernicus. And he hypothesized through immense amount of observations that actually what we were observing in the heavens was a heliocentric or sun-centered cosmos, or a sun-centered, what do we call system, or solar system. And up until that time, the accepted interpretation of the cosmos and of every, like a human being, and it's sort of inarguable based upon your observation, is you think like, oh, that like we are at the center. The locus of meaning is right here on earth, right here, even from my own perspective. Like, I see everything rotating around me. The sun rotates around me, the moon rotates around me. The cosmos is sort of like the Milky Way is consistently rotating around this fixed point, this origin point. And so, of course, that was what produced, that's called a geocentric or geo-earth-centric model of the solar system, or of the system, of the observable natural world. And so when Copernicus came along, and a little bit later Galileo, to back up with intense observation with his famous telescope, this was incredibly problematic for those in power. It was the Catholic Church, the political apparatus that surrounded the Catholic Church, and their authority, because it was sort of suggested an erosion of authority, because upon the Catholic Church and that system, the the apparatus of authority of the Catholic Church was enacting, was behind that was the biblical authority. And so interpretations of the Bible had been solidified, reified, consistently repeated, affirmed, confirmed in the Catholic Church. And the authority went from the biblical sacred text to those, the bureaucracy of power in the Catholic Church. And so to jeopardize that, to get at the heart of that, would be to say, your interpretation of the Bible is wrong, actually. So it was like, that couldn't happen. And it's like, it was problematic. I'm referring to, if you know, in 1609, Galileo with the telescope was like, wait a second, Jupiter has moons. Like, the moon has craters. It's like, no, the heavenly spheres are perfect because that's God's world and God is perfect. And it's like, well, I don't know, I'm sort of looking at it and definitely looks like there's craters up there, and it looks like, and so what happened was all these people went to work to try to justify the observations that were clear. Like, you could, people were like, oh, let me look through the telescopes, observing this stuff. Those observations, they were trying to rectify those observations and fit them in, like square peg in a round hole, fit them into the current worldview. And that's what's happening writ large within Christendom and the contemporary world. It's like we have these biblical lines, these biblical interpretations, just routinely the brunt of, George Carlin's jokes and Louis C.K.'s jokes, and like so many people are just like mocking the sort of absurdities of believing in a literal way some of these texts, even metaphorically. They're like, that doesn't make sense. Like, when we apply some sort of reason or ethic or moral to so much of the biblical verse, it's like, wow, you gotta throw that out. But but then you get ranges of Christian movements that are sort of like, all right, well, we will sort of try to fit current secular understandings of what it means to love, of what it means to have a deep ethic, of what it means to have a reasonable approach to knowledge and history and politics, and try to sort of like bend the text to say what it really doesn't say. And so that's what was happening in the 16th century, because all these people came and were like, okay, well, we're clearly observing abnormalities in the heavens that are completely factual. And so they started building what were called, oh my gosh, what was the word? Epicycles. So they could see that Jupiter, that Venus and Mars were they admitted, like, all right, Venus and Mars are definitely rotating around the sun, but the Earth is still the center, because the Bible says. And so they were like, well, maybe it's like the Earth is the center and Venus and Mars are rotating around the sun, and the sun is going around the Earth, and that's what it is. And so they came up with all these other systems that were increasingly mathematically complex and incoherent, that were absurd, to try to fit new observations about the way the world was functioning into old interpretations of the biblical text and the worldview. And of course, this produced all sorts of conflicts and whatever. Eventually, they got so pissed at Galileo, they were like, how dare you speak the truth and subject us to your observations? Like, Galileo's just like, I just sort of seeing what I'm pretty sure Copernicus is right. I think Earth is rotating around the sun as well. Pretty sure we're in a what's called heliocentric model, not a geocentric model. We're like, nonsense. Everyone knows we're at the center of our own worlds. And they're like, throw him in jail. An inquisition happened, and they threw him in jail. They kept him. The Catholic Church apologized for that in 1992. They threw him in jail. Let's see if that's the date here. In 1633. So it took them like 300 plus years to be like, ah, yeah, you're right. It's a solid lag on one's ability, on like an institution's ability to forgive, on ability to sort of like, as a collective, sort of acknowledge like, oh, that's going to happen. My prediction is that's what's going to happen writ large on institutions that are super large, like institutions like nation states. Still, what does it look like for a nation state to take accountability and to extend apologies, because that would be a compromising of power. We still have a long way to go to understand our relationship to power, but that's an aside. And so there was a meme that I saw yesterday, and it was like, here's the game for you. Open the Bible and do exactly what it says. The first person to get arrested loses. That was so clever. Because if you open to the wrong place in the Bible, you were taking slaves, you were committing adultery, you were murdering. It's like the Bible is this amazing tale of human history and the extravagant drama that unfolded with this little tribe of Israelis, and their sort of heroic tale for survival and their relationship with the divine, and my gosh, do we mess that up when we take it so literally and try to take the human experience, especially our neighbors, and try to manipulate and form them into this mold that we need to see them enact. And it's risky. It's risky business to open our worlds to, quote unquote, the other, to let loose of our interpretive lenses that we have come to cherish, that have actually become sacred to us, so sacred because they've had real effects and real value in our worlds. And to sort of hold those with gentleness and honor, and yet in the same breath, hold them with reverence enough to let them go. And I think in so many ways, life is presenting us with these opportunities to let go of former versions of ourselves, so that we may live into a deeper relationship with the creativity that God's great creation, that this extraordinary act of magnanimous creative momentum is just offering us daily. I work with a lot of addicts and alcoholics to get sober. So I'm a teacher, and I speak and then work one-on-one. And so often those things that keep us sick are those things that we won't let die. And we have a hard time going through the grief process. And on the whole, that's what I see happening with Christendom on a whole. Interpretations of the Bible and interpretations of the life and work and ministry of Jesus Christ and death. Sort of clinging to old, just like almost addicted to old frames that, were once really valuable, and that once made a lot of sense, were deeply meaningful and even sacred, but that now we're being asked to sort of grow up out of those interpretations and to embrace what is a whole new world, to embrace the outstanding, daunting, utterly transformative world that is on offer when we sort of just let things go, let interpretations go. And I think one of those primarily is this idea that you must be saved in this specific way. That did you pray the prayer, Jesus, come into my heart and mind and save me? Well, that has both worked as such an alienating frame and interpretation of the biblical text, despite the fact it's also been like one of the things that has inspired sort of like, you can guarantee me salvation, like an equation, like like 1 + 2 = 3. Like, I can just get saved that way. And I remember, I don't know how many times I said that prayer, and I walked down the aisle and was saved again and again, and still found myself separated from the path of discipline and wakefulness and a walk with God that I needed. And so I needed a living, working relationship with a higher power, with Christ. And that personally couldn't be just divulged in one simple prayer. I needed a new interpretation of what it meant to live in the presence, to practice the presence of God. And I think that's what we need as a whole, like as a nation, as a planet, like just sort of scan out from our view. So I'm going to conclude there. Hopefully you got some value out of this. If you watch to the end, holy moly, that's impressive. And if you haven't heard it yet today, you are loved.